The year 2020 brought a new challenge every day. Each moment was as unique and diverse as the shades of our skin. We saw politics up close and personal. Our response? Name our pain and speak up to make change.
We have amplified the voices of African American political scientists, not only in the United States, but globally.
But the pressing issues of the day are issues that unfortunately seem not to go away. These issues keep re-emerging, resurfacing.
White supremacy, racism, Islamophobia, neo-imperialism. I mean, these are big, broad words, but these are realities of our world right now.
As a political scientist, I, like many others, watch the news, read social media, and often come away shocked and dismayed at our current political and social climate.
You can't have a system that says what? For the people, by the people, and of the people, when you got a veto over the people.
The protests are pretty much always effective. It's just that Black political leadership moved away from using protests. So this effective tool is used more rarely.
All of these inequities are growing even more large, and these chasms are widening. It's almost disheartening sometimes just to see and know what was going on before, and that's exacerbated now in the world that we are in.
I mean, we can talk specifically about inequality and wealth, but we should also talk about inequality in terms of being able to access food, being able to access sanitary shelter. These inequalities are persistent in the U.S. society and other societies at large. Another pressing issue, I would say, is economic relief. A lot of people in our communities are suffering due to the effects of this, unforeseen pandemic.
I'm constantly trying to straddle that line of like, do I need to do this career as a diversity and inclusion consultant as a way to make money so that I can live a sustainable life, or should I just go all the way into the art that's really important to me, like this Black liberation work that I'm doing?
2020 was a year like no other. Pain, trauma, and unrest all across the diaspora. We longed for meaningful change and relief, then saw history as the first Black woman was elected to the United States Vice Presidency.
We just came out of this election. So, of course, the 2020 election is definitely, as a political scientist, is definitely on your mind, because I say it's the election that won't go away.
It's a continuation of the legacy of Black women and their political work. And Black women saying, okay, it's time, right? It's time that we have not just only a symbolic seat at the table, but a real seat at the table.
To see a Black woman ascend to position of vice president, in a lot of ways, it shows, all the work that Black women have been doing, right?
Now that, we have a new administration in the White House, I am trying to see how do we move forward past the 4 years where we clearly had some white nationalist tones coming out of the White House.
It's been sort of difficult for many of us, living through a pandemic at the same time that we are going through an election where there's questions about the survival of democracy in the U.S.
I look forward to these young activists being impactful on the state and local level and not just on the federal level.
It's your time to release all that is in you that will make the world better. Now more than ever, we need the skills and the know-how that you've developed.
As chair of the membership committee, I am extending a very special invitation for you to join us as a member of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists.
Africans, African-descended peoples of color can feel a safe space to express their understandings of the political history of our communities, the struggles that we face.
I think it's really great to have, again, this liberated zone where all of these, yes, intellectuals, yes, professionals are coming together, but more importantly, these family members are welcoming people back. And it almost felt like a formal family reunion.
Every time Haynes saw me, he greeted me with a loud shout of my rich cousin, Paula. That was what, and it didn't matter where we were or how many people were around. This is what Haynes would yell out. Okay, so I didn't have to figure out, oh, I know, that's Haynes, right? But that was just, that's the kind of person that Haynes was. Very gregarious, giving, generous.
It's been a reunion. Every year we come back and we meet old friends.
To have that type of fellowship is comforting. It is as if everyone at that conference is lifting you.
It's important to have Black scholars around that can say, hey, this is the way to go. And I've been grateful that I've had a lot of Black scholars that have come along and said, I'll hold your hand, I'll show you the way.
Also gave me this confidence because I was in a space that was created for me.
We hope to see you at our conference in March, but if not, please consider becoming a member of our very special community.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks. I hope it's not too much distortion coming in this way. Apparently, at the crossroads, we have to be really innovative because all kinds of things will happen. But I need you all to know that the devil is a lie, and we're going to close our session with dignity and determination as we always do. I begin this closing plenary with an expression of gratitude to our California-based program chairs, Davin Phoenix and Corey Gooding, and our Baltimore and DC-based local area planning committee, Tamlin Tucker Ward and Jasmine Noel Yarish. None of the work of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists could happen without the infrastructure that has been built by the extraordinary executive director in the person of Dr. Kathy Stromal Golden and her team, led by Mrs. Margaret Clark. I give honor to the founders of this organization, all the members of our executive council, to our friends, and even to those people who do not wish us well. We look forward to returning real time next year with our program chairs who have volunteered, Stephanie Williams of University of Florida and Tammy Greer of Clark Atlanta University. We look forward to being together again real time. I have to acknowledge our ancestors. I have to acknowledge the Tongva and Ahachiman people on whose lands I reside every day. I thank them for the care of this land and for it flourishing, regardless of all the things that have been done to it, and the ways that it has been mistreated, and the ways that their histories and their political life has been caricatured and forgotten. I want to also acknowledge our honorary NCOPE's 2022 youth attendee, Harry Resh Bidiako, a 9-year-old who attends an independent all-Black school in New York. Harry Resh has been attending all the sessions with his mama, and he is asking questions and fully engaged. Our children are watching, and my own sons, Solomon and Celine, have told me that I had to make sure to put their names in here too. I quote them, to put their names in here too. When we stand at the crossroads, regardless of what we have to face in that crossroads, we have to remember that we can figure it out. I hand the reins over now to our incredible panelists. You can read about them in the program the conference program, which will be part of our archive and live on our website in perpetuity. And I'll ask that they present in order of their needs in the program.
Najja, I think you're first.
Okay. Encourage my soul and let us journey on, for the night is dark and I am far from home. Thanks be to God, the morning light appears. The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. Oh, the storm is passing over. Hallelujah. 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 The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. Oh, the storm is passing over. Hallelujah. I'd like to thank Madam President and the Executive Board for allowing me to be on this closing panel. I'd like to start with a scripture from Psalms 37:25. I have been young, now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor seed begging bread. And so when I was asked to participate in this panel, I started thinking about Black future and this notion of righteousness and how I have been indoctrinated into this Black righteousness from my very early beginnings with NCOATS. I remember my second NCOATS in 2009, I met Dr. Jill Prestige. And although she was feeble and body tired, she still took the time to instill in me and to take the time to talk to me about what I needed to do to progress forward. And she talked to me about the future and in maintaining NCOATS. So it made me think about the notion of Malik Shabazz's notion that the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So how do we prepare for the future? Do we know the power of NCOATS? I argue that we must continue to be proactively Black, intentionally Black unapologetically and out loud. We must stand up where we are and make space for those who are behind us. I argue that we should take on the mantra, anything for NCOATS. Whatever it is that we need to do, we must do it now. And it reminds me of the notion of what Haynes Walton argues about Black politics being a peculiar brand of segregation in environments in which Black people find themselves in. And so I think about that he could not foresee some of the challenges that we face right now, but he knew that they might be coming. Currently, we're dealing with wars and bomb threats at HBCUs. We're living in a post-Shelby County era. We are also facing a dual pandemic, both coronavirus as well as the enduring legacy and strange career of white supremacy. But the notion of white supremacy and its mutations has changed over time, but it remains immune to some of the antidotes in which we create. So what we are witnessing is the erasure of Black progress to erect a veil of ignorance and to whitewash history in a way that disempowers us and disables us. So I propose three main areas in which we should look. First is the notion of saying COFA. We must follow the blueprint that's been laid out by our predecessors, Dr. Jill Presses, Dr. Mac Jones, et cetera, et cetera. And I think about the notion of the show Gold Rush and how sometimes we go back through the intro and they left so much for us. One of the main things that Dr. Prestige told me was that we needed to focus on political socialization. And why political socialization, I'm discovering 12, 13 years later, is the notion that political socialization deals with values and how we receive our values. And she was looking forward while talking back. We think about Mac Jones and his notion of using tools at our disposal, and this notion of being translocal, that we must be translocal and transspatial using both social media and biopolitics, non-traditional, non-conventional forms of political participation and examining. And that the current Black politics scholarships need to take the world to task and command a emancipatory praxis, expanding the boundaries of Black scholarship. We must also, in this way, also understand that the children are our future. They make us better. The 9-year-old that is attending INCOPE right now, the undergrad that is thinking about whether they want to go to grad school or not. And I say to you, you must challenge us for the future. You must take us to task. You must read us for filth, as the students would say. We must also engage in this notion of training students as undergrads, provide opportunities for graduate students, recruit tenure track professors that look and feel like us. Each one bring one. I was brought in as an undergrad by Dr. Jarvis Hall and Dr. Artemisia Stanbury, but my first exposure was with Dr. Floyd W. Hayes III. We must normalize continual growth, that we operate in this space as a family, not to downplay each other, not to criticize each other unjustifiably. We must be willing to discard futile strategies within Black political scientists and within our communities and create a more innovative approach. And lastly, this long-term love for Black freedom. Even though this is a marathon, we must realize it is not a sprint. We must run our race with patience, knowing that we may not see the fruits of our labor right now. INCOPEs must be malleable. We must continue to be opening and a welcoming space for those living in the margins. It must be intersectional. It must be a home and a laboratory of freedom, the brain trust of the diaspora, the heart of political activism. We must not forget our charge left by past members. And this question remains true even today. What does anything we say or do or commit to have to do with the liberation of Black people? And understanding the value of INCOPEs as an incubator of Black excellence that's constantly growing, we prepare for the future. We must keep INCOPEs the mighty Black hand of American society onwards towards freedom.
Thank you for those words and for, the statement that we prepare for Black's futures by preparing today. And I would say that we prepare today by also understanding what came before. Because this now, as we all know, and we were all prepared for, after the summer of racial justice, after these absolutely, the scale of these protests and the way that the conversation of anti-Blackness spread into all of the different industries, we knew the backlash was going to come. Everybody who knew anything about American history knew the backlash was going to come, and it came. The push against, banning critical race theory, which is to say banning any mention of any racism whatsoever, the push in the UK to ban certain forms of protest, to imprison people for up to 10 years for defacing or pulling down statues which are directly targeted against BLM activists. The backlash is here, and it will succeed for a certain amount of time. But those who understand the history of Black liberation and the attempts to achieve Black liberation knew that this was going to happen, and therefore were already preparing for this. We're already preparing for how do you now work around this, and how can you resist this? And that for me is something that I have been trying to hold on to, trying to think, going back to the UK, okay, you're going to ban this form of protest. I guess we need to come up with a different form of protest, because you were very specific about banning a specific act. So now we're just going to come up with new acts, aren't we? And, it's also trying to think of how can we learn from the people who came before us, from the organizers who came before us, who can also tell you, okay, you who are doing this thing that's actually very similar to what we tried, here is what succeeded and here is what failed. Here is how we burnt ourselves out. Here are the fights that are going to come, within community. People are going to disagree about the methods. People are going to disagree about the kind of tactics we should be using. And so for me, thinking about Black futures is also thinking about, how are you building community? How did people build community in the past? And how did those communities break apart? And if you can already think about where the fault lines came in the past, and where, people were getting into really personal fights in the past, you can maybe avoid these personal fights in the future. And, this is to also think, where would our energies be best served? It is, extraordinary that we have so many more Black legislatures now than at any moment in the past, but we also know that legislation has failed many times in achieving what we need to achieve in terms of the wealth redistribution that we need, in terms of the federal protections that we need to stop individual states from going rogue and basically trying to create their own little white supremacist fiefdoms, even if they can't change the whole country. And so this, again, it's making me think, okay, is there what non-state, non-legal, non-state options were Black radicals thinking of before? The Black anarchists, the Black communitarians who are really thinking, this is not going to work, like trying to get the system to work for us is not going to work. But knowing that, how can we provide and organize for our communities around that, around the acknowledgement that the institution is never really going to be able to protect you, is never going to be able to change in the way that you need it to, which can seem very pessimistic. And I think we are going in for, at least in the UK, we're going into a very dark period where the Conservative government is doing on a lot of fronts. They're trying to rip up a lot of democratic protections. They're trying to rip up a lot of civil rights protections, and they will succeed because they have a huge majority, but people are fighting in the streets. And so for me, thinking about how, NCOPS has really been an extraordinary space for thinking through all of these alternatives and presenting you with just the spread of ideas. It's not about picking one over the rest. It's like, here are all of the moral problems that you can think of. Here are all of the structural problems that you can think of. Here are all the international problems that we can think of. And therefore, here are all the tools that are available to you. You will need to pick the tools that work for your local community. You will need to pick the tools that work for your country. But in thinking of Black futures, it's really thinking about the entire tool set and all of the variety of thought that is available to us that I really only see at NCOPS. And this is what, why I'm so relieved and so glad that this space exists, and a space that I hope to cultivate going back home to the UK, maintain these links and hopefully create some little small version of that in the UK. Because again, it's you build community by building more community, which will build more community down the line. And that will be it for me.
I believe I'm next. Thank you both so much for your words. I appreciate what's already been said. Yeah, I have a few remarks that I would like to share with you all. Greetings, first, everybody. I also want to express deep thanks to the conference organizers, NCOPE's leadership, section chairs, members, invited guests, and all others involved in cultivating a conference experience that has been both enriching and inspiring. In this moment, we are in urgent need of spaces that, in the most fundamental sense of the word, inspire us, which is to say those that fill us with breath, infuse us with a vitalizing force so that we might carry ourselves, others, and our work forward into the future. As we continue to witness and experience efforts undertaken by those in power to inhibit our very capacity to do that, this is especially necessary. And here I'm talking about some of the things that have already been mentioned about the steady stream of police violence and other forms of anti-Black violence, widespread environmental injustice issues that disproportionately beset Black and Brown communities, political disenfranchisement, both old and newish in form, forced displacement of vulnerable peoples across the globe, contributing to a swelling refugee crisis, anti-trans violence, whose targets are often Black, flagrant spectacles of white nationalism that doesn't seem to produce the same kind of stimulant to act as does the presence of people publicly in protest heralding the value of Black lives, the desecration of Indigenous lands, coordinated attacks against those of us who dare speak the truth, and a pandemic that has worn on in considerable part due to the early propaganda efforts to distort the truth inherent in the reality before us. It's all very wearing, really, and that's the point. Taken together, these events and projects of domination are intended to wear us out, to wipe out, which is in effect about dulling our sensibilities to the possibility that our futures could in fact look radically different than the reality we presently inhabit. These assaults are about tiring us to the point where we throw up our hands in resignation and contemplate why continue to struggle. The idea is to exhaust us to the point that we simply abandon the conviction that our futures can be made in the image of emancipatory, liberatory values of freedom, justice, radical care, and love. I know many of us are tired, which is why communities such as NCOPE's are immensely necessary. Here, I'm reminded of a moment in Angela Davis's autobiography that on its face might appear rather inconsequential relative to the larger scheme of her life and the enormity of the liberation struggles of which she was a part. Quickly, while out and after having experienced the shock of some other intense blows against the movement, a woman came up to Davis and said simply, "We are behind you." In recounting that very quick exchange, Davis announces the importance in liberation struggles of situating oneself within communities in which all are willing to stand up behind, girding one another's backs so that we can march forward in this work. It is, as Dr. Kwan said during the panel, "I write what I like," that we must exist in solidarity. Doing so, Dr. Kwan urged, is what makes this work sustainable. They said, it is not easy, but you don't have to do it alone. We've got to do what we've got to do, and we've got to push back. Our time together in this setting is coming to a close. I cannot help feel but energized and braced by the support of a community collectively committed to working toward building more livable worlds. We are an organization whose mission it seems to me, is to build bridges toward the establishment of a future where what rests there are those radical dreams, those yearnings and visions we have been told in one form or another are impossible. We might consider an NCOPE's tagline, creating spaces for where the impossible can rest. And this takes me back to a striking moment at the beginning of this conference when President Tiffany Willoughby Herard, during her opening remarks, called for us as a body of the organization to meditate on a small but important raft of questions. There was something like this: what are we imagining? What futures are we envisioning? And finally, what kind of portals are we willing to travel into? I dwelled with that final question for a while. What kind of portals are we willing to open? Which is to ask, using the gifts, the talents, and resources we have available to us, what kind of gateways or doors do we have the capacity and are willing to wedge open for the purpose of enacting liberation? The willing part of the question assumes risk. And Dr. Hakeem Jefferson knows something of that. Indeed, he noted that a part of this work does not get lost on him. Dr. Willoughby Herard's inquiry invitation framed my listening for this conference. That is to say, I was listening for how we are engaged in what I would call portal work, the work that we do to create openings in order to help realize ours and others' liberation, and what the nature of such work entails. So here are a small collection of my observations and ruminations on that topic. Portal work is continuously raising the profile on the varied forms of anti-Black violence arrayed against and attempts at suppressing the production of knowledge at Black centers of education. In this way, Dr. Stromae Golden is calling us into a portal which we take sight of the significance and sheer insidiousness of this form of terror so that we can organize and share knowledge and resources for how to combat it. And to be clear, and this has already been mentioned, I'm referring to the string of bomb threats made against a number of our HBCUs last month. The portal here is offered for the purpose of continuing the development of Black knowledge and the cultivation of Black scholars and leaders, and done so in a safe environment. So let's walk through. Portal work is embodied through the brilliance and steadfastness on display in a most beautiful celebratory parade of books, those written by our illustrious members. The portal work here vibrates with a message. You can too. You might have been told your work doesn't fit within the parameters of political science, but write those words. Okay, let's walk through. On that note, portal work is calling into spheres of legibility the ideas, phenomena, knowledges, and various metrics for evaluation that some of us here have been told exist beyond the scope of the discipline. This is what Dr. Sinclair Chapman claimed as her work, the labor of making visible the knowledge at the margins and saying, that counts as political science, let me through. So let's walk through. I listened in on the portal work being done in Africatown, Alabama, which is where the Clotilda, the last ship of enslaved people to arrive at our shores, and a place now overrun by industrial sites, creating a nexus of dangerous and fatal environmental injustice issues. Elder Major Joe Womack spoke on the collaboration between he and a team of amazing Oberlin undergraduate students who helped fight the city of Mobile from rendering it a zone of fungible matter, which includes, of course, those inhabiting it. Through data collection of the soil and preserving oral histories, the city of Mobile now has no choice but to listen to Africatown residents. Portal work here is forging liberatory collaborations that quite literally save lives. Let's walk through. Portal work is thinking about and researching innovative ways to mobilize Black voters. Let's walk through. Portal work is engaging in discussion about pedagogy and education that does not promote colonial values. Let's walk through. Speaking to the form as well as the content of this conference, portal work was even found in the sidebar chats where I witnessed others and took part in uplifting one another. It took the tune of something like this: talk that talk. Go ahead, sis. I'm proud of you. So deserving. Preach. Why is this portal work? Because it is an invitation to keep on carrying on, and we need this. So let's walk through. Portal work is creating space for a 9-year-old youth attendee to grace our panels and feel supported enough to engage and ask questions. I don't think I need to tell you why this is portal work. It is. So let's walk through. Portal work is being done through the sharing of resources, dropping a book recommendation, an article recommendation, sharing grant opportunities, making known job opportunities. This kind of portal work reminds me of a line Audre Lorde penned in a letter to her dear friend and poet Pat Parker, where she says, "Whatever I have, know that is useful to you is yours." It is clear to me that NCOPE's members imbibe this. We know that others can sometimes be stingy with their resources, so opening portals involves using what we have to get others through. I could say a lot more, but I'll end with this. Portal work is sacred work. It is necessary work. It is hard work. It's work. It's work that is not divorced from our reality. And in that sense, it is in many ways survival work, hence the necessity. NCOPES is a portal. What we do is portal work. As Dr. Willoughby Herard and so many others have said over and over again during our time here at these conferences and in other spaces, many of our being here in the positions in which we are is evidence of others' portal work done on our behalf. I'm here because of the portals created through which I walked and was willing to walk through. So my work is portal work as well. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for the wonderful words of my co-panelists. I think, they really do embody when we think about NCOPES. So when I think about the idea of Black futures, I think about them in two ways, in two different phrases. First, starting with my own journey into NCOPES and my own personal academic life, I think about Black futures in the context of a future first, but never the last. Several years ago, when I came to NCOPES in 2015, as a very, very nervous grad student, I presented my paper, and it was the first paper that I had ever delivered at an academic conference. And at the end of my paper, there was a scholar that was very tall for me in comparison, who greeted me with a very warm smile and told me that she looked forward for me to coming back next year. And I've always provided the fact, well, given I had the opportunity to come back, I always came back the next year. So this year for me, fast forwarding, was a several year first as well. It's because of NCOPES this year, I was able to organize my first panel discussion. I also experienced my first leadership role with a national academic organization. And it's also the first time that I am speaking at every single day of the conference. And those that know me knows that is a very big thing. So when I think about that, but even though that this is the first time, as it was in 2015, I know that this will not be the last. And it is while that I am before you all that I would like to publicly thank the scholar that greeted me so warmly, Dr. Tiffany Willoughby Herard. Dr. Willoughby Herard, when you talked to me in 2015, that was such an opening for, as Desireé says, that portal work, that bringing me into the space. And I just want to thank you so much for your loving leadership, as it has been very crucial to this organization and really embodies the spirit of NCOPES. And that's the beauty of Black spaces like NCOPES. It's a future of first. It's a space where we can learn and grow and how to be nurtured. It's a teaching space where we can learn the value of ourselves at any age. Yet on the other hand, when I think about Black futures, I think about the progress we've made so far, yet we have so much more to go. Recently in on Baltimore on social media, there's new interest in the cause of death, in the death of Donnell Rochester, who was killed by Baltimore City police officers in February. While the interest is emerging, some have remarked about the outrage as being slow, given at the center of the case is an 18-year-old queer Black man. It reminds me of the work of Tabitha Bonilla and Alvin Tillery, who empirically prove how those intersections of Blackness and other identities can be pushed out to the margins when it comes to addressing issues of police brutality and unequal justice. It reminds me, if we think about our Black futures, they must look in the way that Bell Hooks stated, from margin to center, when she said that where our foundations must be based on a recognition that we need to eradicate the underlying cultural basis and causes of sexism and other forms of group oppression. It's as I stated in my public scholarship article that was looking at Bonilla and Tillery's work that says that we must keep the same energy for all Black lives. So when we think about these things, that's really what we're thinking about when we're considering NCOPES. It's a space where we learn and we craft ideas and new energies on keeping the same energy for all Black lives.
Thank you. I was just trying to do my little reactions there. Thank you very much for that. I would like to, I'm Anand Commissiong. I teach in political science here in Cal State Long Beach, but I want to meet a challenge of being the last person after so much Black excellence because so much of what I want to say has been intimated by all of my colleagues on the panel so far. So I want to start with a bit of pessimism. So let me try this approach. Not necessarily an Afro-pessimist pessimism, but a pessimism that will, of course, have consequences for we who are dark. And by this, I reference the war in Ukraine. But I don't want to reference it for the usual reasons that have been bandied about in the media. Rather, I invoke the war to remind us of Amy Césaire's observation that, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you want to know the truly rotten heart of Europe, and here I put Europe in quotation marks, we need only look at how Europeans treat their own. And here I would add how Westerners have been constructing Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees, invasion, aggression, war crimes, etc., in this context, as opposed to the non-white, non-European world. In Black political thought, it occurs to me that what is juxtaposed with Afro-pessimism is not Afro-optimism, but Black futurity, our conference theme. A focus on futures is not necessarily optimistic. We subjects of domination who resist these conditions cannot simply be optimists. Rather, the future is a commitment to our survival together. Or as Desireé said, I'm rooting for everybody Black. So I want to pivot from these general observations to focus on us. I reference the current news only to intimate what Black futurity must face. For at the same time, this is the challenge, as so many scholars and activists like C.L.R. James, Sylvia Wynter, Walter Rodney, Cedric Robinson, Angela Davis, and on and on and on have pointed out, Black people have been dealing with this from the beginning of European intervention in and domination of the world. It is this set of experiences, survival strategies, and resistance in the face of such unimaginable cruelty, I find my Afrofuturism. For we are living proof of the tenacity of our ancestors' bodies and minds. We here who gathered are living proof of the power of our own ideas and our actions. This thinking in academia often happens in isolation, it's true, but our action here in community, in conference, that even that sometimes solitary work, we can act together. Moreover, what this conference will illustrates to me is the future in the more prosaic sense. And here I want to give a shout out to all of the students that have been on all of the panels. It's been a really great experience to have so many students on, graduate students, undergraduate students, even better undergraduate students on panels. That has been just a breathtaking and really inspiring aspect of the conference that speak to Black futures. We are resilient, and we are propagating ourselves. We are influencing ourselves. We are inspiring ourselves, and I think that is a central part of what Black futures is capable of doing in community, but also sometimes in solitary work. Here, I want to also reference the possibilities that are available to us when we act together, and I think that's an important part of what we as academics or academic activists can do is think about and think about our past and our future, and think about those things together. Now, I just want to end with a few remarks about the question of electoral politics and revolution. I know that's a weird pivot to make there, but I in terms of what's possible in the future, I don't want to make any decisions right now about, or make any final statements about which one is the path forward. I think both of them are essential. That is the more, what may seem to be the more prosaic, boring electoral politics is important, but so is revolutionary ideals, so revolutionary action are important. Both of these, again, looking to the past, have proven themselves, as many of our panelists have pointed to, have proven themselves to be essential to our survival and thriving in this world of white supremacy. And so I want to just underscore the relation that we academics have to both the electoral politics of our futures, but also the revolutionary potential of our work, and our work in solitary, but our work together as well through conferences like NCOPS. And I will stop there so that we can have some time to talk. Thank you very much.
Very much, everybody, for closing in this way. I don't know where we are on time. Like if we have like 10 minutes or people
9 minutes.
Yeah, 9 minutes. So the only thing I want to say is get somebody's phone number at this conference, because clearly the Zoom will do whatever it wants to do. Get somebody's phone number, get somebody's address, commit to checking on them once between now and the next conference, and really, really listen. Really listen to somebody that you saw their paper here, or you just saw their name in the program. Reach out and really let's keep each other strong in these various places that we're walking. I'd like us to close with a video that Lester Spence from Johns Hopkins made, and a group of images that he took and that Jasmine Garris collated, and that Desireé Nelson put music to, and that I think leaves us in the right kind of frame of mind. And throughout the conference, like many of you all, I've been in like deep memory over Dr. Kathy Golden's daughter, who passed during our conference last year. And I haven't wanted to say anything in particular, but I just, when we say we are family, the way that was explained to me was that, Cedric Robinson was my mentor. His mentor, when I took my job at San Francisco State, became a person who worked on research projects with me, and who also fed me and my wife and made sure that we were okay, and introduced me to their friend. When we say that we are family, we mean that we know each other's mothers and fathers' names. When we say that we are family, we mean that we actually know about each other's lives. And when you can carry that kind of knowing, you can survive any space. You can know how to rest in any space. You can have discernment in any space. And you can step up and lead and be bold in any space. So please play that wonderful video. Thank you, everyone, for an amazing, amazing conference. And we look forward to being together, skin to skin, foot to foot, hip to hip next year. All right, everybody. Thank you.
I got problems. Dance my pain away. I got problems. Now listen to my story. Bill collectors on me. Have to file bankruptcy. Need some help from somebody. Doctor bills are stacking up. I'm desperate to make a buck. I played the lottery today. Won't you please wish me luck? I'm gonna dance my pain away. I got problems. Dance my pain away. I got problems. Yeah. 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 I'm gonna dance my pain away. I got problems. Dance my pain away. I got problems. Yeah. 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 I just got laid off today. What you think wifey gonna say? I'll just have to hope and pray. Rain, go away. The repo man just hit me. Can't get from A to B. Fake friends around me. Lord, won't you help me? Now I'm on my tippy toes, face down, eyes closed, dancing to this melody. So please, won't you sing a song? I'm gonna dance my pain away. I got problems. Dance my pain away. I got problems. problems out on the dance floor. Dance your problems away. I wanna dance my pain away. Dance my pain away. Like whoa, whoa,
Najja.
You're welcome. Thank y'all for coming out. God bless. Good night. We're done.
God bless. Take care, my friend.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. I'm looking up your work, Ashley.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Right, jotting down names furiously. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to be
Take
a
care.
Baltimore girl for a second when the music came on. That's
Oh,
the
yes.
music of my people.
Got to do it. Got to do it.
Oh, man.